College football nerds, we are talking top 10, and we're so excited that we've had enough football to kind of be able to cobble together a top 10. In the comments, you need to give us your top 10 and tell us kind of how we're crazy, where we're wrong. Let us know what's going on. We're just excited to not be talking theoretical, not be worrying whether or not there's going to be a season or not. We've had enough football. We can talk top 10, but some ground rules first. Y'all, we're not doing Big Ten teams. And Big Ten fans are going to be frustrated with that. I know I saw something last week on Twitter where somebody that we follow was like, it's insulting that Ohio State isn't ranked right now. Big Ten's not playing, and one of the things we do when we rank teams is we say, how would you compare based on what you've done so far if we swapped resumes, if we swapped and you had played them to this point. Big Ten hasn't played yet, and it's not fair to rank them when other teams have a loss. It's not fair right now. That'll catch up, and we'll get there, and we'll put Big Ten teams accordingly. We had Ohio State number one almost all year last year. We have them as one of the only three teams that really matter this year in terms of national championship race. Again, the main question is, where do we slot Wisconsin and Penn State and Michigan? And we just don't know yet. And a good example of this, and Josh is waiting patiently on this long open, a good example of this, we were comparing notes before we started this when we were talking about our respective top 10s. And I noticed in the top 25 this week, Georgia's number 4. AP is ranking Big Ten teams. They have Ohio State number 6, which is like the worst of both worlds because you're ranking them, but you're dinging them for having not played yet, which is absurd. Nobody who has eyeballs saw Georgia play Arkansas Saturday and thinks that Ohio State wouldn't be favored on a neutral field against Georgia. So to have Georgia ranked 4th and Ohio State 6th means enough AP voters are doing that, and we're just not going to get into that business. So with that, Josh, why don't you get us started with your number 10 team? People seem to like it last year. We went back to front. So give us your number 10 team and we'll go from there.
My number 10 team is Cincinnati. And it's almost a joke because if you follow us on Twitter, you know that I've often said, and I'll say I'm the one that takes the blame for this a lot, I think Cincinnati is really good. I think sometimes they get hyped up more than they should. But given the teams that are out there, I think number 10 is reasonable for Cincinnati right now. They're playing really good football. They had you can call it a struggle win 24-10 to Army. It's not about the fact that it's a service academy. It's about the fact that it's a triple option and it's a shortened game. It's hard to really win those by large margins. But Cincinnati, they look like a good team. They look like a good team on both sides of the ball. They return good players. They dominated Austin Peay. More importantly, I don't really know who else you can say should be ahead of them. I will go ahead and say the team that is not on my top 10 that will draw some criticism, and that's UCF. Right now, I think Cincinnati is better than UCF. And yeah, UCF came out and dominated Georgia Tech. But you know what? They beat Georgia. UCF beats Georgia Tech by, I think, like 28 points. Georgia Tech then turns around and loses to Syracuse by 17. And Syracuse, I know transitive properties and everything, but Syracuse got blasted in their opener by North Carolina. So what you realize is I don't think UCF's really played many people with much competition, and Georgia Tech really kind of stuck with UCF for most of that game until Georgia Tech shot themselves in the foot enough to put it away. I right now believe Cincinnati is a better team overall, and I'm not sure UCF would necessarily beat Cincinnati in a neutral field, so that's why I have Cincinnati at 10.
For my number 10, I have Texas, and we were comparing notes before this discussion, and you've got them a little higher. Sorry to spoil your rankings there a little bit. I got them at number 10 and no better because they did score 63 points on Saturday, but they gave up 56. And look, I've been high on Bowman for a number of years. I was high on him before he got hurt. I think he's an elite quarterback. I think he is not just a system guy. He's an NFL quarterback. I like him a lot. They also scored 56 points. And as somebody who's killing LSU today, which is fair, somebody who's killing LSU today on Twitter, you gave up 56 points. I mean, come on. That to me is very scary for a team that we were very high on. Somebody from the Big 12 needs to step up. I'm going to give them a little bit of credit and say you did win the game. and there's plenty of time to kind of wash the stench of giving up 56 points and almost losing to Texas Tech off of you to get into the playoffs. Hopefully, you got to win out, given how bad the Big 12 is. Here's my bigger concern, Josh. What have we said Sam Ehlinger's entire career? People want to talk Heisman numbers because he has a lot of attempts, or he has a lot of touchdowns, he has a lot of yards, he has a lot of rushing yards. 6.6 yards per attempt versus a bad defense. So that's where I've got them number 10. Ehlinger not looking great, honestly, in terms of Heisman type numbers against a bad defense. They should have scored 90, honestly. Give me your number 9.
My number 9 is Texas. And it's a lot of what you said. Now, I'm a little more forgiving with the Texas Tech situation because Texas Tech did return most of their offense. And if you saw them losing a lot of games last year, realize Bowman, the quarterback, was out and they had major issues without him. In 2018, when Bowman was the starter, they were really effective and they were putting up 40 to 60 points on the regular. I'm not sure that they're not one of the top, a top 5 or top 10 offense this year at Texas Tech. But I agree with you. There's some other things that are concerning. Yeah, Ehlinger had 5 touchdowns in this game and 262 yards, but he did it on 40 attempts. So touchdown on every 8 attempts is great, but not when you're throwing for 6.6 yards per attempt. There was, there's just way too much dinking and dunking, and it's the passing game is an extension of the run without much explosiveness right now. That's concerning. And that game, like you said, the defense struggled. 88 plays run by Texas. Lots of issues, but enough given where everybody else is at. And I'm going to make one point before I hand it back to you for you to give your, keep moving down your list. If you disagree with us and think some teams should be higher, teams should be lower, that's fine. Tell us in the comments. Tell me why I'm an idiot. But do me one favor. If you think, Texas, there's no way should be in the top 10, tell me the teams that you think would clearly beat Texas. And if there's a team that you think should be in the top 10, justify why you think they're better than the teams you're jumping them ahead of. Because I will tell you right now, it is really hard to find 10 teams that are really, really clearly good. Because quite frankly, there are not 10 teams in the country that do not have substantial warts and have played any significant competition. So that's why I have Texas at number 9.
I think that's entirely fair. The point that you made, and also that it's very likely that Texas is just suffering a little COVID hangover and they will put it together and we can forget this game, and I hope they do. It'll make our off-season prediction look a little better. We got to speed these up or we will put people to sleep, so I'm going to do a couple of ones here and we'll maybe go rapid fire. We got North Carolina at 9 and Georgia at 8. I like what North Carolina did handling their business against Syracuse and looking clean when other teams were having things fall apart. That I really liked. I'm still not sold on anything at North Carolina besides the quarterback position, honestly, to move them any higher. And I'm not sure that once we do bring Big Ten teams into the fold, if I'm saying that, if I can honestly think that Penn State wouldn't beat North Carolina. But so far, clean record, haven't stubbed their toe. So I like that. Georgia, this is where I really break for the AP voters. I don't know what they saw Saturday. Maybe they just looked at the final score. A couple of AP voters had Georgia at number 2, and they voted Big Ten teams. So they had Georgia ahead of Alabama, ahead of Florida, ahead of Ohio State, all 3 of whom would be favored against Georgia on a neutral field. I'm really concerned about what I saw offensively. Great defense, maybe best defense in the country, but at some point you got to be able to score. And when you cannot run the ball against Arkansas, who gave up 5.5 yards per carry last year, that's a huge scare. Give me your, 8 and 7 for you?
So my 8 and 7 are North Carolina and Miami. North Carolina, same thing you said. I mean, the Charlotte game gets canceled, so we haven't seen a lot of them, but they look clean and good against Syracuse. I think they're a good team. And again, compared to the teams below them, just sort of almost by default, I have them there. Miami, I think Miami has been really good. And they seem to be in a resurgent team. I'm going to eat some crow. I said Florida State might be a team that could really emerge this year with Norvell, and I got it completely wrong. The team that seems to be turning around is Miami behind Derek King. He's not really lighting the world on fire as a passer, but he's being a good, competent passer while at the same time being an electric runner. And the whole team is just playing massively better as a result. I will say, as an aside, I don't know why I'm not putting them higher. I watched a lot of that Florida State Miami game, and I will tell you, quite frankly, Florida State is abysmal. And several of the scores in that game were due to the fact that Florida State is out of position and giving up touchdowns, and they would have given up touchdowns regardless of competition. But Miami is good enough to capitalize, and right now, for me, that's enough to get you, you know, seventh in the country compared to everybody else.
When he says abysmal, y'all earlier, he compared them to Vanderbilt, which is quite the swing from Reese saying that Norvell might be on par with Bear Bryant or something. I heard it out of context, so it's not fair. My next two, Mississippi State and Miami. Mississippi State is high on this list because, look, we were ringing the alarm bells back after the draft for LSU this year. So them losing to Mississippi State wasn't a huge surprise to us. We were not high on them this year for a number of reasons. One, it's just hard to overcome that much attrition, both from a coaching staff and from everything else. But Mississippi State came out and played ball, and they've got enough. It's kind of like the reverse of Georgia in that we have worries about their defense, but we know that they're going to be able to score against anybody. They would score points on Georgia. I think they would beat Georgia if they played right now. Josh might disagree. I don't think they're great, and I think that like all Mike Leach teams, they're going to give up a 60 burger at some point down the line, and they're not going to last in this top 10. But for now, the teams that we have to rank, and we're not ranking Big Ten teams or Pac-12 teams, that's where I got them. Miami is next. Like you, I have some concerns that the teams they've played just haven't been very good. But last year, they were playing teams that weren't very good and not beating them or really struggling with them. Whereas this year, yes, a lot of it has been mess-ups from the other teams, or it has been like can't sustain an offensive drive, but boom, I hit a shot. But they weren't doing that at all last year, and they play good defense, which I like to see. So that's my next two. Give me yours.
So my next one, and now I'm at number 6, is Georgia. I'm with you. We did a preview for Georgia, and we took a lot of flack because I said I think they were going to be 7-3, and people said I don't see where you could possibly get that from. This is why. I mean, the offensive line, like you said, they can't run the ball very effectively. The quarterback situation was a disaster with Mathis. I don't know if it'll be settled, but as of today, that defense is not good enough to make up for the fact that I'm not sure they would score 20 points on any top 30 defense. You could lose to a lot of teams like that. I will say the team that I do not have in my list, as we get to the teams you can guess above, is Mississippi State. We diverge a lot, and a lot of it really comes down to the fact that I was lower even than you were on LSU going into the season with the departures they had on the front four, particularly in the edge, and the opt-outs and attrition they suffered. I think that this is just a team in complete free fall, quite frankly. And watching that Mississippi State game, the lack of pass rush from LSU was jarring. And given the fact, if you play an air raid team and you cannot generate any pass rush and the defense doesn't know what they're doing, you can give up a lot of points to any air raid team. I don't buy that Mississippi State is going to score that kind of points throughout the season. In fact, I really don't think they will. I think LSU was that out of sorts. We've seen it the past couple of years. Saw it last year against Ole Miss in a game where the offense just wasn't quite good enough to keep pace. So I don't have Mississippi State that high. I think it was more a reflection of how bad LSU's pass rush was and how much they had to depend on one-on-ones with players that didn't know where they were going. And I think both those teams are, honestly, Mississippi State is better than LSU, but neither one of them is particularly good.
And to your point, where I'll give you some credit, Mississippi State had 623 yards, I think, passing. They also threw it 60 times. So 44 points is a lot when you think about it, but they had however many yards rushing they had. I just had a feather fall on me. However many yards rushing they had and 623 passing yards and got 44 points. I think Alabama scored 43 points on LSU last year. Good LSU last year, national championship LSU last year with 400 yards passing. So they generated a ton of yards but weren't that efficient even though they got the 44 points. Give me your next one so you can stay ahead of me, and I think that would be your number 5.
Yeah, my number 5 is Auburn, and I have them right in front of Georgia. those two are going to flip flop basically off the outcome of this week's game, and you can see our preview, but there's probably a hint of how it came across. I think right now Auburn is a more complete team than Georgia. And what Georgia's going to have to show me in this game is that they have the quarterback situation figured out enough, or the ability to run well enough to be able to score points on a consistent basis. Auburn looked flawed against Kentucky, but Kentucky is actually a good defense. And Kentucky's problem is they can't score. Auburn didn't really let them score, and they waited on it, and they got a lot of turnovers in that game that let them put it away, when that's why the margin was what it was. But Auburn does look like they have an offense that can generate points. They can hit some shots downfield. They can run the ball a little bit, and the defense is still quite good. I think right now, and I said this otherwise, I think if you were to like take the average of every player on the team, Georgia is probably 20% better than Auburn in my mind. But football, like you said, sort of Mississippi State, is a game about scoring points and not letting the other team score. And Auburn is better at that right now than Georgia is. So I think Auburn, I have Auburn ahead of Georgia because I think they're a lot more likely, they're a more complete team that they're going to win games in a more consistent manner.
Just to give some perspective on how weird ranking is right now, if you had to extrapolate Auburn out, and they're my number 5 team as well, and you said basically everything I was going to say, so I'm going to make it a little more interesting and talk and ask you a question about it. In a normal year, let's say Auburn played 13 games and played a normal SEC schedule and a hard out-of-conference team, which they normally do, and a really good bowl opponent. We've got them number 5 in our top 10, but in a normal year, does Auburn feel kind of like to you like an 8-5 team?
Yes. In a normal year, I think they feel like an 8-5 team. I will be honest, I think Auburn is going to lose multiple games. And this ranking is still justified. There is not a lot of distinction once you get outside this group. Auburn, I think, is the closest to the group above them in terms of consistency and quality, but there's still a lot of warts and issues. But yeah, I agree with you. In a normal year where everybody's more consistent with the level of play they currently have, yeah, they'd definitely be more like an 8-5. But right now, very few teams look even as consistent on both sides of the ball as Auburn did.
That's my number 5. So give me your number 4.
My number 4 is Notre Dame. And, again, Notre Dame didn't look wholly impressive, I thought, in the Duke opener. Yeah, they pulled that game away and they won. I didn't think they looked great, but they just came out and stomped USF. Neither one of us are super high on Ian Book. We both have tweeted about it. Quite frankly, I do not believe Ian Book is a superstar quarterback. I think he is a competent passer, and every time they want to hype him into a Heisman candidate is just unrealistic. But they are still a good team that is a complete team on both sides of the ball. They execute reasonably well. They have a good defense. And like we said, right now that's enough to have you, like with Auburn, right at the top of the heap because, quite frankly, there are only a handful of teams in the country that are playing good football on both sides of the ball.
Mine is also Notre Dame, and since we keep having the same picks, I'm actually going to move ahead of you and give another one. But one note on Notre Dame, I've maintained this for a while now. They're well coached. They're coached above their talent level, but their talent level is a big enough gap between the very upper echelon that they just can't get there. Ian Book is a better running Greg McElroy. I mean, in terms of if anybody wants to think about who he is, he's a more mobile Greg McElroy. That's it. My number 3 is Florida. It looks like we're probably going to have the same top 5, which is kind of boring. My number 3 is Florida. I think that Florida is basically Notre Dame with a almost Heisman level quarterback. Kyle Trask has come out of nowhere. I think he did something like 570 and 6 touchdowns Saturday against Ole Miss. And Ole Miss's defense is trash. But Kyle Trask, with having a weapon like Pitts to throw to and Tony on the outside and finally found a little bit of running game, Florida's scary. I have some concerns on defense, which is rare for Florida, but they're scary. I've got them at number 3. Give me your number 3.
Yeah, it's Florida. Same points, and it was 416 yards passing, to be exact. 9.9 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns. And you look at like Ian Book, like we were talking about with Notre Dame, he didn't, even in that South Florida game, Ian Book was 7.5 yards per attempt, and he didn't throw a touchdown. He only threw 19 passes, but still. So there's like you said, the gap between these two teams in my mind is Trask, and also the receiving position is better at Florida. I have worries about the defense, but I'll give credit too for Ole Miss. Like Corral came out gunning, and that guy was a high level talent recruit. It may turn out that the combination of him and Kiffin may make them into being a much more dynamic offense than people are giving them credit for, and I'm not sure that scores is worrying. That's a lot like the conversation with Texas Tech. I think Ole Miss, now I will say their defense is so bad that we may be overreacting to the offensive performance from Florida, but I think offensively, Corral's problem was all mental last year. He's as talented as they come offensively, so that may be a much more adept offense. And you can guess where the last two are, by the way. I mean, do you just want to throw them out in your order? And I think we probably have them in the same order.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama 2, Clemson number 1, and like you said on Twitter, 1A, 1B. We can more have a discussion about these two teams. To me, without Ohio State being in the mix right now, they're so far out in front. Maybe Florida could give one of these teams a scare, but defensively, I've got some concerns. Alabama and Clemson are playing right now and look right now like the good version of themselves in years past, as if COVID never happened, which is shocking given how much worse other teams are looking. So we've always talked about this chasm where we don't have enough, and this is why we're against an expanded playoffs. We've never had enough teams to have 4 good teams in the playoffs. There's always been some crazy blowout where we had to put a team in there that didn't belong because of whatever reason. Right now, we've had that every year. Right now, that gap is even worse and even more amplified. And right now, it's Clemson and Alabama. I'm guessing you're feeling this.
It is. And I have, like you said, Clemson 1, Alabama 2, and it's really a 1A, 1B situation. Clemson looked more complete. But, like 37-13 Wake Forest. Missouri's better than Wake Forest, frankly. It wasn't necessarily that different of a score. I think it's funny because I think a lot of people feel like Clemson's been more complete and Alabama's a little shaky in that one game. I'm not even going to consider the Citadel. It's hard to evaluate them. Both teams, like you said, it reminds me a lot of 2018, right? And we said, like, going in early that year, Clemson and Alabama were on a different level, and we really didn't think anybody else was going to be close to them. And we were right the entire year, and it was boring as heck. But without Ohio State, that's what this looks like. Clemson and Alabama look like they're in midseason form. They are dominating their competition at a level that's almost silly. They could have won those games by significantly higher margins if they felt like it. Defensively, they're probably as good as anybody in the country. Offensively, they may well be the 2 best units in the country for right now. So it's just a stupid high gap. The only other team, as we said, that really could compete with them potentially is Ohio State. It would be unfair to rank Ohio State right now with them. I would have them 1A, 1B, 1C regardless. I imagine they would be enough to be up there. But as you said, and I want to reformulate that point, right? It's how you've played against the teams you played and how you would have done against everybody else's schedule. We don't really get into that right now because there's only been 1 or 2 games. I can't talk about how Ohio State would have done against Missouri when I haven't seen Ohio State play, and I can't say how Alabama would have done against Ohio State's competition that doesn't exist. So I can't apply that formula at all, and you've got to leave them out. But I certainly think having Ohio State at 6th, I believe it's truly idiotic. I mean, to have them behind Notre Dame, you talk about Georgia, but behind Notre Dame at 5 is just rough.
Yeah, and to me as a voter, you lose credibility when, gun to your head, your house is on the line, your whatever, your entire bank account is on the line. You're not picking Notre Dame or Georgia to beat Ohio State right now. That doesn't mean they couldn't beat them in a 1-game scenario, but given all that we know about these teams and what we've actually seen from Georgia and Notre Dame, you're not picking them. 2 teams we left out of this were Oklahoma and LSU. We're going to do another video, and the link will be in the description, about what went wrong Saturday for both of these teams. We're going to unpack that. We've got a lot of, I don't want to say victory lap to come for that, but things that we've seen from both of these teams for a while now that we've kind of danced around because we didn't want to upset fan bases too much, but we've said it and now it's kind of come to fruition even early in this season. So we're going to talk about that in another video. So this is our top 10, and it doesn't have those two teams. We're looking forward to doing a top 10 when the Big Ten can actually play. Pac-12 to Oregon, we'll give you some love. So keep an eye out for that. Give us your top 10, and make sure you check out our What the Heck Happened this weekend. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week, and God bless.